Eucatastrophe by A Real Sword. Chapter 3. Janice. Remus is of the opinion that they should start searching through the forest immediately and thoroughly, with reckless abandon. He says this in far more incoherent terms, of course. There's screaming and swearing involved. And as much as Janice would like to do just that, going into the possibly haunted, maybe cursed forest that's just taken Thomas from them is such a bad idea that expressing exactly how bad it is would take several hours that they don't have. And there's the matter of Virgil, still on the ground, shaking and looking like even more of a wreck than he usually does. And Logan, who looks as if he's going to drive himself into a breakdown over trying and failing to extract even the slightest semblance of logic over what's just happened. That isn't to say that everyone else doesn't look just as bad. Hell, even Janice feels as if he's going to fracture into a million glittering fractals if anyone so much as nudges him in the wrong way. But Remus and Virgil are the priority right now. In the end, it takes an inordinate number of sugar-coated lies and uncomfortable truths that taste even sourer on his tongue than usual to convince everybody to go back to the house. The cold, dark house that should be their house, technically and semantically speaking, but without Thomas just feels like a place that Janice is intruding in. He gets Virgil settled on the couch with a blanket tightly wrapped around his shoulders. Patton turns on all of the lights and double-checks the locks on the doors about 500,000 times, as manic and obsessive as if he's trying to take Virgil's job away from him. Logan walks in and out of the kitchen, frowning and muttering frantically under his breath while all of this is happening. With all of this going on, it does end up taking a few minutes before everyone's in the living room, clustered in the L-shaped bend of the couch, facing each other like a tense family meeting is about to begin. There's a horrible silence that seems to overwhelm everything and everyone, smothering them like darkness or fog. Roman breaks it. "Has anyone tried sinking out yet?" he asks. Everyone exchanges glances, and then there's a brief pause wherein the 6 of them attempt to do just that. And it's the strangest feeling, to make as if to do something that comes to them as naturally as breathing, and to just not be able to do it. Now that Janice is actually thinking about it, he can't for the life of him remember how sinking out or in is actually instigated. It's as if the muscle that controls it has been nearly severed, taken away from him without having noticed until this moment. He looks up and guesses, from the expressions on everyone's faces, that they've all had just about as much luck as he has. This isn't good," Patton mutters, which may just be the understatement of the century. "We need to call someone," suggests Virgil numbly. "There's got to be someone that can help." "Oh, and who do you propose we dial up?" Janice asks. It comes out more snappishly than he might have liked. Apologies would seem too insincere. He plows onwards. "Oh, of course. I forgot about that helpline phone number that we've got conveniently pinned to the fridge. The 24/7 fairies stole the culmination of our collective beings. We'll help you get back to them any hour of the night hotline. Thank you so much for pointing that out, Virgil. I never would have remembered otherwise." Another one of those dreadful silences, and then Virgil looks up at him. There's no anger in his gaze, and he doesn't look like he's gearing up to respond to Janice's sarcasm, which, honestly, it surprises Janice a little bit. He's well aware that his reaction had been more than a bit abrasive and uncalled for. "Are we saying it's fairies, then?" Virgil asks. His voice is small. Well, Janice sighs. His hand goes up to fiddle with the brim of his hat, and he remembers that he had lost it while following Thomas out of the house nearly 15 minutes ago. Had it only been 15 minutes ago? When you put it like that, it sounds ridiculous, stupid, implausible. A breath. "I don't know. Fairies aren't real," Logan says, carefully and slowly, less like he's trying to argue and more like he's trying to convince himself, or recall some long-forgotten fact and commit it firmly to memory. "Of course they aren't," agrees Janice. "Just like animators can't turn living people into cartoons. Just like someone's sense of morality can't get up and eat spaghetti from the fridge all by themselves. Just like our fucking stove can't talk to us." "None of that counts," Roman objects. "None of that's real," Janice says, and laughs with an edge of hysteria in it that he doesn't really like but can't seem to erase. "In case you hadn't noticed, neither are we." Nobody seems to know what to say to that. After a second, Patton gets up abruptly and makes for the stairs. Everybody sits up just a little bit straighter, although nobody questions his departure, and Remus quietly begins to shred one of the couch cushions into long, curling ribbons. Patton returns in less than a minute. He has Thomas's phone in one hand and plops himself down on the nearest chair, unlocking it and tapping away. "What are you doing?" Virgil shifts towards Patton, moving to lean over his shoulder. His fingers are drumming out a frenetic, arrhythmic tempo on his legs. "I'm calling Joan," says Patton, who was scrolling through Thomas's contact list with a scary combination of intensity and emptiness in his eyes. He glances up and meets Janice's gaze. "Even if it's not, someone needs to know that Thomas is missing. Maybe they can call the police for us." "But at 1 o'clock in the morning?" Virgil points out. "I know," says Patton. I know. It's super rude, but they'll understand. It's an emergency. And even if they can't help, not at all," he adds, jabbing at Joan's name and then at the dial button. "I want to hear their voice." Janice sighs and curls his legs up to his chest. They're all silent, waiting as the phone rings and rings and rings. "Thomas, what the fuck?" comes Joan's tinny, bleary-sounding voice in a loud whisper from where the phone's jammed against Patton's ear. "Do you even know how early it is?" "Joan," says Patton. "Oh my gosh! Oh, jeezy crazy Joan! I know it's super ridiculously early, or I guess late, but this is kind of a really bad emergency, and honestly we didn't know who else to call." There's a pause, and then, tentatively, "Thomas?" Remus is gesturing wildly and impatiently in his direction, so Patton switches the call to speakerphone and puts it on the coffee table. "Not exactly," he says. "Technically speaking, we're all him. Except we might not be anymore, and this isn't my department at all. I'm sorry, I'm not making much sense." "Hang on. Roman?" Joan says, still sounding half awake. There's a sound of rustling, and then, wait, no. "Patton?" Yes, that's me. I'm Patton. Actually, we're all here, but I guess I'm the only one on the phone right now. Guys?" "Hi," says Virgil half-heartedly, which sets off a chorus of equally half-hearted and immensely lackluster greetings from all around the room. "Okay, so..." Joan sounds a bit more alert now, like they're trying very hard to pay attention and understand what's going on. "Patton, you're calling me from Thomas's phone? Which would make sense, I guess. It's not like you guys would be able to call out to the real world with yours, but why? What's the problem? Why can't Thomas call me himself?" A pause. An intake of breath. "Thomas is gone," says Patton, his voice getting a bit smaller even as he says it. He shrinks in on himself, like the act of speaking it aloud is physically diminishing him somehow. "What?" It's flat and deadpan enough that it would be comedic under any other circumstances. "There was... something crazy happened. Thomas, he kind of went crazy in the kitchen, and then he tried to stab Logan, and he ran out into the woods, and we tried following him, and Virgil caught up to him, but then he did something bad, and now he's just gone, and we're all in the house, and we don't know what to do." Whoa. Okay, Pat, come on. Shh, it's okay. You're not making much sense right now. Can you put Logan on for me?" "Right," says Patton, and he wrings his hands a bit, apparently unsure of what to do with himself. Logan sits up a bit straighter and scoots over so he's closer to the phone. "I'm here," he says. "What do you need to know?" Logan's explanation is concise enough, although also somewhat scattered and nervous in a way that only a panicked Logan explanation can be. It gets the job done. They seem to grasp the severity of the situation, and with the assurance that Joan's coming over as quickly as they can, there's not much else they can do except sit around and wait. Logan gets up about 5 minutes into the uncomfortable, all-encompassing silence that ensues, and heads for the kitchen purposefully. Janice hesitates for a moment, glancing around at the others, but ultimately does end up getting up as well and following him. He doesn't know what he had expected Logan to be doing. Cleaning up the mess, maybe? Or at least attempting to clear it up a bit. But no. Instead, he's peering into the fridge with a slight frown. Janice slinks over to stand behind him and glances around Logan's outstretched arm, braced on the fridge door. The fridge light appears to have stopped working at some point. He would have thought that it'd be empty, seeing as how the contents of it are very visibly scattered around the entirety of the kitchen. But, in fact, there's one item of food still remaining inside. The blackberry pie. Slightly burnt around the edges, a little lopsided, missing 2 pieces. It's sitting right in the middle of the uppermost shelf, perfectly intact and untouched. "Ah," says Janice. "Indeed." Logan replies. Janice sees that his hand, wrapped tightly around the fridge door handle, is trembling ever so slightly. I don't think we should eat that, Janice says very slowly. Logan just shakes his head. He seems unable to tear his eyes away from the sight of the pie that's just sitting there. It's a surprisingly threatening sight for an inanimate, edible object. You know, he says. His voice is not as strong as usual, not nearly as certain as it should be. I have no idea what to make of any of this. The facts are these, says Janice. He touches Logan's back, very lightly, hoping it'll be able to ground him in some way. He might enjoy the spectacle on any other occasion, but right now, the sight of the very personification of logic falling to pieces before him is wholly unsettling in every respect. Thomas went into what was, in retrospect, an unsettlingly perfect clearing, and took the berries from it. He ate those berries, he was the only one of us to do so, and later that night he... Janice gestures expansively at the room around them. Well, all of this. It might not have even been him, come to think of it. None of us could reach him. He didn't even seem to be connected to us. And when he went back outside, the forest claimed him. Claimed him, murmurs Logan. An interesting way of putting it. We all saw what happened, Janice says, removing his hand from Logan's back to clasp it tightly with one of his own behind his back. As convincing as your fairies don't exist mantra is, it's hard to deny that the sight of the trees literally bending to drag him into the darkness was anything close to natural. It doesn't make sense, Logan groans, dragging a hand through his already thoroughly disheveled hair. None of this does. I don't... Stop. He whirls around to face Janice, eyes narrowed. Why are you presenting the facts? That is the exact opposite of your job. What are you up to? Janice can't quite help the sudden jump of his heart at the insinuation that he's doing something wrong. Logan is stressed and angry and scared, just like the rest of them, but that doesn't mean it doesn't sting. I am presenting the facts because they are what you are currently denying, he says, as calmly as he can manage, and because it serves me no purpose whatsoever to assist you in denying them. I want Thomas back as much as any of you. Just as much as any of you. Without him, we are incomplete, and... His hands tighten on each other behind his back. And I have my doubts that we'll exist for very long without him. Logan freezes. His look of suspicion and fear is replaced by, well, just fear, actually, and more than a little trepidation. Your hypothesis is that, since Thomas has left without us, we will all cease to exist? Do you have any evidence for that? It's just a theory, based on a feeling. He sighs. Based on my sudden recollection of a particular plot point from Back to the Future, which is, of course, a terrible movie with a dreadful soundtrack that nobody should watch ever. It is rather good, Logan agrees after a moment. Apart from the rather sketchy time travel mechanics, that is. There's a lot to unpack there, really. Wait. Are you implying that the only reason we're all still here is that Thomas's absence simply has yet to catch up to the rest of us yet? For all we know, he could be dead already, Janice says. Logan visibly flinches. It's a very possible truth that you're denying. Don't give me that look. And in that case, non-existence could be just around the corner for all of us, and we wouldn't even know it. Is there any particular reason you're attempting to scare me like this? Logan hisses, now lowering his voice. Even if that is the truth, there's absolutely nothing we can do about it. Janice looks at him for a very long moment, and then averts his gaze, hating himself a tiny bit. If he's going to be honest with himself, which doesn't happen a lot, mind you, he doesn't even know why he'd said all that. Habit? An attempt to distract himself from the awful reality of the situation? Does he just really like winding Logan up? Never mind, he says. I don't think I'll mention this to the others. That is probably for the best, says Logan. He looks at Janice for another long second, and then his gaze drifts over to the kitchen table, where the large pot full of green slime is sitting. It's no longer bubbling, which doesn't serve to make it any less disgusting. Janice's gaze travels over in that direction, too. He wrinkles his nose slightly at the acrid, pungent smell. Meat that's beginning to rot, spoiled milk, a million other ingredients that he really very much does want to speculate on right now. It's only gotten worse since it's been sitting there unattended. They should really open a window. What do you suppose he was trying to achieve? Logan just shakes his head. I don't know, he says, his face twisting slightly as he says it, as if in physical pain. If that wasn't Thomas, then it could be anything. If it was... I'm really not sure. I'm not sure a psychotic break isn't entirely off the table at this point. Janice sighs and holds one gloved hand delicately over his nose as he goes up to inspect the pot more closely. He leans in, and while doing so, sees several emptied-out containers of various shapes and sizes on the other side of the table. He picks one up, a large plastic bottle of rock salt, which he's sure had been full the last time he'd seen it. Completely empty. Next to it, a container that should have been full to the brim with powdered nutmeg. Similarly empty. He takes a step back, rather hurriedly. The contents of that pot, he says, are something that I also think we shouldn't be eating. And we should all probably start praying very hard that Thomas didn't eat any of it either. Agreed, obviously, says Logan, and hurries forward to take Janice's previous position over the noxious brew, brow furrowed. He swipes a finger through the residue at the brim of the pot and examines it for a second or two. This is charcoal. Where did he get charcoal? Janice finds another empty container of salt resting on the countertop and feels something in his chest tighten unpleasantly. And Logan is now looking through the rest of the discarded boxes and containers, scanning the kitchen as he holds them up. He ripped open these tea bags? Did he put those in there too? It looks like it. Not to mention the curry powder, the celery, half a bottle of apple cider vinegar, says Janice, and then freezes as he sees a container on the ground, one that absolutely does not belong in the kitchen under any circumstances. He snatches it up and looks inside. The lid's been unscrewed and discarded already. Empty, scraped clean. Fuck. Please tell me he didn't put shoe polish into that. Are you asking me to lie to you? Logan says without a hint of amusement. He picks up an empty thermos from where it's been discarded on the side counter, before dipping it carefully into the liquid and filling it up to the brim. He caps it and carries it to the sink to wash off the gunk on the outside. We might need a sample, he explains, to a questioning tilt of the head from Janice, in case Thomas returns, and... Bring the snake that bit you along to the hospital, Janice says, nodding. Logical. I should very much hope so. Logan puts the container in the fridge next to the pie and shuts the door. Because I really don't know what else I can do. It's at this point that the doorbell rings, and the whole house seems to go silent for a brief moment. The quiet discussion that could previously be heard from the living room falls to nothing. Logan and Janice exchange a glance. The frantic sound of an out-of-control Remus sprinting to the front door, slamming into walls and various pieces of furniture on his way, is all too audible and entirely too distinctive. Oh dear, mutters Janice, instinctively reaching out one of his more intangible hands into the void. To grab him, perhaps? Drag him back from injuring himself or breaking anything? But nothing happens. Just like his ability to sink out and away, it's missing. He hisses angrily to himself and clenches his fists momentarily before relaxing them. He doesn't like this. Not in the least. But there's no time for this. Logan spares him a split-second worried glance, but Janice shakes his head. Together they hurry out of the wrecked kitchen and towards the front door. It's open, and it's still just as windy and miserable outside as it had been during their brief outdoors jaunt earlier. A tired, slightly rumpled-looking Joan is standing on the front step. They are wearing a loose t-shirt and flannel pants, having apparently rushed directly over without bothering to get properly dressed. And Remus is right up in their face, talking at lightning speed, practically ranting in his haste to explain every detail of the situation to them in excruciating, horrifying detail. Joan is trying their best to placate him and get him to slow down a bit, but it's next to no use. Remus is spiraling, dramatically. The way he's shuddering and twitching every few seconds is a testament to that. Remus is frequently out of control and a living disaster in equal measure, but this isn't like that. Usually he's fully aware of both of those things and completely owns it. Janice would say that Remus looks like he's on the verge of just screaming, non-stop and at the top of his lungs, with no regard for anyone's comfort around him. But he had already done that in the backyard for nearly 15 minutes before Patton managed to calm him down enough to get him inside. Thomas's neighbors are probably already making plans to move away and never come back at this very moment. Roman arrives at the front door as well, and gently tugs Remus away by the elbow. "Come on, Ree, let's go talk to Patton," he says, and glances over to Joan with a wave of welcome that's far less excessively dramatic than it usually is. "Greetings, friend Joan," he says, managing a thin smile. "Come on in." "Hi," says Joan, looking faintly relieved at the reprieve. They hurry inside, tugging off their beanie and coat. Janice doesn't hesitate to firmly shut and lock the door behind them as securely as he can. They clear their throat, glancing around awkwardly. They're acting like they've never been in the house before. Janice supposes it must be strange to be in your friend's house at an ungodly hour of the morning, with your friend, as you know him anyway, not being physically present. "So, should we—" Janice nods. "Let's go sit down. We'll catch you up." They migrate inwards. As they approach, Virgil and Patton both look up at Joan and gain identical expressions of absolute relief. They're all just as fond of Thomas's friends as Thomas himself is. The affection bleeds through them like watercolors, staining the way in which they see the world in bright, vivid hope. Some of them are just more visual in showing it. For example, all Janice really wants to do right now is cling to Joan and never let go. But he would never in a million years entertain the merest thought of actually doing it. Affection for other people? Ugh. Patton has no such inhibitions. Joan sits down on the couch across from him and Virgil, and he launches himself across, practically throwing himself right at Joan as he barrels into enthusiastic, somewhat desperate hug. They let out a soft oof, and then wrap their arms around him, kind of just rolling with it. "Hey, Pat." "Sorry," he mutters, partially muffled by the cushions that his face is kind of sideways squished into. "It's been... let me just stay here for a minute or two?" "Don't be sorry," Joan replies instantly, leaning into the hug and squeezing him. They still look half asleep, and also completely out of their mind with worry and confusion. "You guys are Thomas. Thomas is my friend. You're my friends too. And it sounds like you've been having a hell of a rough night. Virgil, do you—" Virgil hunches into himself, picking at his fingernails, and stares at Joan for a long, long second before nodding. He gets up and goes over to sit at their other side, before just sort of falling over onto them in a decidedly Thomas at the end of a long filming session-esque move. Joan pats his shoulder and then looks up at the rest of them, now congregated on the unoccupied couch space. "So," they say, "what's going on?" Filling Joan in on the situation takes nearly 15 minutes, due in no small part to the fact that they keep talking over and interrupting each other's trains of thought, and there's really nobody who's been designated as the primary speaker. Usually Thomas would be the one directing the flow of conversation and drawing their trains of thought together in a similar vein, but right now he's not here, so it's less like a single cohesive, coherent track, and more like a whole lot of destructive multi-track drifting. When they're done, Joan nods their head, and then shakes it and lets out a long string of filthy curses. "Same," agrees Remus unhappily. "What do we do?" Patton asks. "We should call the police," says Joan uncertainly. "That's what you're supposed to do for missing persons cases. I should be calling them. Right now." There's a moment of silence. "I can't help but notice that you are not, in fact, doing that," Janice points out, raising an eyebrow. Joan groans and rubs at their eyes with a sleeve. "Yeah, see, the thing is, the police are going to want to know a whole bunch of things. Like how I knew he was even missing in the first place, why I bothered to come over at 2 a.m, and... Guys, if they come over right now, they're almost definitely going to want to search the house." "So?" says Patton blankly. "That's probably a good thing, right? They can maybe figure out where he went. If it wasn't the forest, I mean." "The house that you guys live in," Joan says. They sound a bit more testy than usual, a lot less patient and laid back. "That you're currently standing in. All of you. The people who happen to be more or less perfect clones of the guy who's missing. You know, Thomas Sanders." "We can leave the house," Logan says, just as Virgil lifts his head and says, "Wait, is that even a problem?" "Why wouldn't it be a problem?" Joan asks, turning to look at Virgil, who's pushing himself away from their side so he can sit up properly. There's going to be a lot of questions about, God, fuck, I don't even know who you are, what you're doing, how you even exist. I mean, look at him. They point at Janice, who waves back somewhat sardonically. Janice, is literally half snake. He has scales on his face. Janice runs a hand down the snake-wise side of his face absently, and freezes. No, I don't, he says, cutting off whatever Virgil's about to say in response. Really, says Roman, looking wholly unimpressed. Is this honestly the time for your arbitrary, mendacious flights of fancy? We've got a situation here, Moni Lython. No, says Janice, and pulls a finger along the slit that runs up the side of his face. Or at least, where the slit would usually be. This isn't a lie. I'm not... My face. It's normal, I think. He swipes along his cheek again. It's smooth. Smooth and flat and not bumpy in the least. He hates the sensation immediately. I think this is... makeup? Another moment of silence. That is... Logan takes a swift gasp of a breath in. Concerning. But not something we can really deal with right now. Apologies, Janice. Janice nods. His fingers trace a line down from his temple to his chin. The chalky residue of what he assumes to be concealer catches on his fingers. I understand. Virgil, continue? Virgil is now casting concerned, borderline terrified glances in Janice's direction. His fingers are going up to rub at the dark circles under his eyes. Although those are makeup already, Janice doesn't know what he's trying to achieve with that. What was I going to say? Right. I was going to say, do we have any guarantee that anyone besides Joan is actually going to be able to see us? We don't, says Logan, and then stiffens. And we shouldn't. This shouldn't even be something that we're debating right now. I don't follow, Joan admits. We are meant to be purely theoretical, Logan says sharply. He sounds faintly angry, not really at Joan, not really at the others or himself, just at everything. We are not meant to be analyzed or categorized, Joan. We are just meant to be. Our actions and existence are impossible by definition, and we exist in a realm of perpetual plausible deniability. If we effect or accomplish anything that has repercussions in the real world, it must be something that Thomas himself is able to do himself without our presence being required. We are Schrodinger's entities brought to fruition, a trick of his overactive imagination that have gained life and complexity that astounds even me, and we should not be able to exist without him, even for the faintest sliver of a second. But here you are, says Joan slowly. Here we are, Logan agrees, and sinks back into the cushions of the sofa with a soft sigh. For now, at least. Virgil buries his hands deep in the fabric of his hoodie. There's a bit of a precedent for this, he offers dully. I mean, we can pass through walls and floors. People don't even look at us when we're hanging out with Thomas in public. Maybe it'll be the same here? I'm not so sure about that, says Patton, raising a tentative hand into the air. I mean, you're absolutely right about that, Virg, and in any other situation I would absolutely 100% agree with you, but, we can't pass through anything right now, I mean. You can't? Joan says. We can't sink out or summon anything, Logan says, and I've been assuming because there's currently nowhere to sink out to. Wherever Thomas is, he's beyond our reach. Whatever this is, it may also be why we're losing our, for lack of a better term, special abilities, Janice adds. I can't summon extra arms. My inhuman qualities are diminishing and being replaced by placeholders, to use another inadequate term, and I'd bet good money to bet it's the same for the rest of you. No, you wouldn't. You don't even have any money, says Roman. Virgil nods. My spooky voice isn't working, he says. I thought it was just stress, but it should work better under stress. Joan frowns. You're spooky? Oh, right, Tempest tongue. Geez, that can't be good. From the other side of the couch, Remus lets out a growl low in his throat, and then his head snaps up abruptly. What the fuck is wrong with all of you? He bites out abruptly, making Virgil jump. Logan takes a deep breath in. Remus, he says. Remus glowers. He rockets to his feet, as if propelled upright by a furious burst of air or a tightly wound spring. "Seriously, what is wrong with you? Thomas is gone. Thomas could be dead in the ground with worms burrowing all the way through his putrid, rotting, twitching corpse, and you're all talking about fucking metaphysics." Roman's holding his brother's arm. Not forcibly. He's not actually tugging him back or restraining him properly or anything. It looks more like he's just trying to reassure him that he's still there. "Well, what do you want us to do?" Patton exclaims. "It's not like Remus, we can't do anything." "We should be going out into the forest," Remus growls, "and fucking looking for him." "Remus," says Logan again, perfectly reasonably, but with just the slightest hint of a tremor echoing underneath it, and the two of them lock eyes fiercely for a second or two. It's unclear exactly what's being communicated through this, but after a moment or two, Remus huffs and allows Roman to pull him back to the couch without another word. "Fuck," says Joan. "Fuck. Okay, Okay, how about this? Doing anything tonight would be stupid. Really stupid. So I'm going to go back home until tomorrow morning, which is..." They scramble for their phone. 5 hours, Virgil contributes, glancing up at the clock. "Yeah," they say. "You guys can come over too. Stay the night. Shit, do you even need to sleep?" They don't pause to let anyone answer the question, plowing onwards. "Then I'll come back, and I'll call the police, and they can do their thing, and then you guys can come back, and we can work something out." "But what?" Remus snaps, fingers digging into the fabric of the sofa. "I don't know," Joan exclaims, tugging at their hair in what Janice notices is pretty much the exact same motion, although he suspects that neither of them have noted. "Jesus, Remus, I have no clue what to do. Oh, here we go. Here's a thought. Let's pull up WikiHow. How to rescue your friend from a murder forest. 10 steps with pictures." "Getting back to your house is a good start," Janice interrupts, calmly, reasonably. "So let's do that. There's not much we can do here, anyway." "The kitchen." Virgil sits bolt upright. "What do we do about the kitchen?" A pause, and then Logan says, with feeling, "Shit." "Hey, mind your fucking language," Patton snaps. "Should we even bother cleaning it up?" Virgil asks, fingers worrying at the hem of his hoodie. "I mean, if the police are coming, they'll probably check it out, but it's such a mess and it might throw them off. What if they think Thomas just had some sort of fit? We should probably do something, but it's everywhere. It'll take forever." Joan squeezes Virgil's shoulder. "Hey, come on. It's going to be okay." "They're right," says Janice. The lie tastes like nothing in his mouth. There's no tug towards it. Lying is easy and habitual, but no longer a faint compulsion, and he doesn't know how to feel about that. "I'm sure it won't do any harm if they see the current state of the kitchen. It's not as if it could hurt them. But we may want to take the pie with us, just in case." As he speaks, he also becomes aware of the fact that his tongue is just that, a tongue. No forked end, nothing special about it in the least, and he tries not to let his panic show on his face. "The pie?" Roman asks, brow furrowing. "What on earth would we want with the pie?" "I'll go get it," Logan says, standing up. "That and the sample." "That's obstructing a police investigation," Patton objects. "What they don't know won't hurt them," Janice says. Joan lets out a little and gives him a look that makes it pretty clear that they can see right through him, or at least most of the way through him. He just blinks back at them and wonders if his left eye is as brown as everyone else's now. They all cram into Joan's tiny car and set off back to their house. It's a tight fit, and they end up with Remus sitting in the front seat, for the group's collective safety, while everyone else crams uncomfortably into the back seat. It's that weird, liminal time of the morning when they arrive. It's dark enough outside, but there's scattered bird calls echoing, and the sky is a dusky, dim shade of something that's extremely hard to place. Joan shows them to the guest room, pulls out 2 spare mattresses, and asks if they can sort themselves out for the night. Upon getting vague noises of assent from mostly everyone, they wish everyone an exhausted-sounding good night, or good morning, I guess, and stumble back to bed for a couple hours' worth of sleep. Only some of them end up sleeping. Roman and Patton crash almost immediately, both electing to share a mattress. Logan takes the other, muttering something vague and unconvincing sounding about healthy sleeping habits, and Virgil curls up next to him, leaving Janice to take the actual bed. Remus's sleeping arrangements aren't a problem, because it's very, very obvious that Remus has no intention whatsoever of actually sleeping. He just paces. Silent, angry pacing that would probably drive literal deep furrows in the carpet if they were existing on a more conceptual level right now. When Janice asks him quietly to stop, he does. He comes to sit on the bed where Janice is lying, contorting himself into a painfully small ball of fury and tension, and he stays there. He's not vibrating, exactly, but it almost seems as if he should be, with the amount of angry energy he appears to be containing within himself. Janice looks over and sees that Logan's eyes are wide open. He's staring at the ceiling very intently, as if all the answers to every one of his problems are inscribed there. He has a feeling that if he went to check on Virgil, who's not within his range of vision right now, he'd be exactly the same. He breathes out, rolls over, and shuts his eyes against the darkness. He barely gets even 10 total minutes of sleep that night. Morning comes. Joan taps on the door to let everyone know they're heading over to Thomas's to let the police know about his disappearance, and then they're gone, leaving their party of 6 to awkwardly convene in the kitchen and figure out if they need to eat or not. They don't seem to need to, and also don't particularly feel like doing so anyway. Talon makes an appearance for some breakfast of their own, and offers some worried words and pats on the shoulders in response to being told the entire situation. But it seems as if their health is on another downwards dip, and they don't stick around all that long, gathering up their laptop and heading back in the direction of the main bedroom. "I won't be very good company, I don't think," they say, "but tell me the moment there's any news, please." "We will," says Roman. Joan returns at 1 in the afternoon, looking absolutely exhausted. Apparently the police had arrived almost immediately and not let them go for several hours. But on the plus side, they had released the house as a crime scene into Joan's care. "They're notifying his family," reports Joan, "but they all live too far away for any of them to look after the place. And it's not like he has any pets or plants to look after, so you guys can probably head back there if you want. I can drive you. If you want to all stick around in a place you're more familiar with while we all—" They make the vaguest of gestures with their hands. "Try to sort this out." "If it's not too much trouble," Logan replies, and then, "Thank you, Joan. Thank you for all of this." Joan just sighs. "It's really the least I can do," they say. So that's how the 6 of them end up back at at their house. They're clustered around the dining room table, frantically researching. For the first couple of hours alone, it had been tense and uncomfortable, none of them entirely sure if someone would come knocking on doors, demanding to know why they were there. But at some point, the paranoia had died down into markedly less tense alertness. The research had been Logan's idea, because of course it had. And not a terrible idea either. With a lack of anything better to do, they're trying to get a better hold on the background and legends behind the whole fairy kidnap theory, which, as ridiculous as it is pretty much their only lead at this point. Logan's commandeered Thomas's phone, and Patton and Remus are shoulder to shoulder sharing his laptop, and Virgil's currently crouching on a backwards-facing chair, biting his lip and shaking his hands anxiously every so often as he attempts to recount to Janice the exact details of what had happened with Thomas at the forest's edge. "He said something weird," Virgil is saying. "Well, I mean, everything he said was fucking weird. It was like he was possessed or something. But it was almost like he was trying to recite something. Something about growing and arms and adders, I think." Janice dutifully notes it down. Fucking weird possession, growing and arms and snakes. Oh hey, nice, snakes. It means nothing, but the act of committing it to paper seems to be somewhat reassuring to Virgil. "Wait," says Roman, looking up from the assorted volumes of fairy tales he's paging through on the other side of the table. "You said he was reciting something. A poem?" Virgil growls a bit, rumbling up from the back of his throat. "How should I— Sure, a poem. Why not? I can't remember. I was pretty out of it by then, in case you can't remember." "They will change me in your arms into a deadly adder," Roman announces, more like sings actually, holding up a finger in the air, as if to pause all other conversation in the room. "But hold me fast, and fear me not. I am the baby's father." There was a moment of silence. "That's nice, Roman," says Patton slowly, "but I don't see what that has to do with any of this." But Virgil is nodding. "That's not it exactly, but close enough, I think. Yeah, that's what he was saying. What is it?" Quite simple, really. You see, Roman pages frantically through one book, and then another, and then a third, and then he throws it down, shaking his head. Blast. I was trying to do a dramatic reveal, but none of these books have the tale in question. He clears his throat. What I was going to say, it sounds like Tamlin. Tam what now? Goes Patton. But Logan is clearing his throat and adjusting his glasses. Tamlin, he says, briskly, eagerly. The classic tale of a determined young woman who rescues her lover from the Queen of Fairies. It varies in form and style. It must have been told and retold hundreds upon hundreds of times since its genesis. But some general strands tend to remain through all the versions. Roman nods along to this. Right, exactly. Tamlin is cursed by the Queen to turn into all sorts of dreadful, nasty beasts, and the only way Janet can rescue her lover is by holding on to him and not letting him go. Virgil's knuckles go white over the edge of the chair. Shit, I let go of him. He told me not to, and I did anyway. Are you saying Janice reaches out and presses a hand to Virgil's shoulder, pushing firmly, grounding him. Shh, he says, although it doesn't have much effect, as powerless as he is right now. Nobody's saying anything about what you did or didn't do, and we don't blame you for it either. Virgil relaxes a tiny bit, and doesn't question the veracity of this. Probably a good thing, because Janice isn't at all sure how true it is himself. Why would Thomas try to tell me the words of an old folk song? Why would he make the world's deadliest smoothie at ass o'clock in the morning and chug it down for shits and giggles? Remus says with a hint of maniac fervor to it. Because he lost his entire mind, went completely off the deep end, flipped like a spring-loaded pancake, and ran away into the fucking forest. Or maybe, says Roman pointedly, maybe he was trying to tell us something. Something like I shouldn't have let go of him, Virgil says, clearly about to start spiraling, which is definitely something they need right now. Or where to find him, blurts Janice, because it's the first thing that comes to mind, and when everyone stops and stares at him, he shrugs. What? I know the story, too. Tamlin lives in Carterhaugh Wood. He's bound there because the Queen wills it. It could be a clue. Right. Just one problem with that. Carterhaugh is in Scotland, says Roman. We live in Florida. Wait, stop. Hold on. Patton holds up a hand in the air, frowning. We're not seriously saying that Thomas was kidnapped by the Fairy Queen, are we? Logan almost shrugs, but then just ends up shaking his head. All we're saying right now is that Thomas certainly seemed to want to let us know that Tamlin was important somehow. The excerpt from the ballad itself, all that talk about not letting go. Folk ballads, Virgil says. Right. Cool. Did anybody else find anything? I've been attempting to ascertain likely routes that Thomas may have taken. Logan indicates the phone he's holding. On it, Google Maps is up and displaying various on-foot routes. The hope being that we will be able to track him somehow in the morning. And? Patton sounds cautiously hopeful, but Logan shakes his head. No, nothing that makes sense, not yet. And you? Well, Patton begins. Tried to figure out what the fuck was up with that whole wildly twisting forest thing, Remus says, jabbing a finger perhaps too violently at the computer screen. You know, shared hallucinations, Reddit conspiracy theories, previous experiences, that kind of thing. Tried, failed, we keep getting porn sites and Lovecraft. The, other sites were probably because of the way you were phrasing the searches. Patton contributes. I don't think Google likes it when you swear that much. No idea about the other thing, though. Lovecraft? H.P. Lovecraft? Logan asks, brow furrowed. Is there really any other one? Virgil points out. Yeah, I really don't like that guy, Patton mutters. Do you know what he named his cat? None of us want to think about the truly horrific name that Sir Racist McRacism-Face bestowed his unfortunate feline companion, Roman said, face twisting. Not now, not ever. Well, Lovecraft definitely has nothing to do with this, Janice surmises with a sigh. So we might as well just go back to folk songs and fairy tales. Bitterness seeps into his voice, unbidden, for all the good it'll do us. Almost at the exact moment he says it, there's a noise from outside, faint, like something scratching up against the window. Janice tenses up. He can feel Virgil tensing up as well under his hand. Logan, who is currently talking, doesn't seem to notice. In that case, some more research into the myths and variations on it, or any of the child ballads, really, might be prudent. If we can just get— "Logan," says Janice, but the sound of something heavy colliding with the door, a dull, angry thump, is loud enough that everyone in the room can hear it. Janice feels a sharp electric thrum of terror course through him. "Oh, God," whispers Virgil in the ensuing silence. "We're being robbed." "Or," says Patton, with a note of forced tear in his voice, but none the less matching Virgil's volume, "maybe a package just got delivered. It could be this week's HelloFresh order. Didn't we get the one-pan creamy chicken gnocchi and the American beef enchiladas with tomato salsa and sour cream? It could be that. That sounded like a food being dropped off noise." "Is this really the time for a product placement?" Janice says incredulously. "Well, we do have to keep the bills paid somehow," Logan points out. More silence. Janice strains to listen, but can only hear wind and crickets outside. Nothing new. "Maybe it's nothing," says Roman hopefully. Another thump that definitely doesn't sound like nothing. Quieter this time, like someone throwing something fairly lightweight against the door. And then another, and another, and then silence. "Well," says Roman, "that isn't good. Probably." Remus bounds to his feet and snatches up an entire full-sized lamp, ripping the cord out from its socket, slings it over one shoulder, and goes stalking toward the front door with purpose, ignoring everyone else's instant panicked objections. "If there's any fairies out there," he yells at the top of his lungs, "I'm going to beat their sparkly asses into equally sparkly piles of gore." The 5 of them remaining seem to be frozen in place at the table. Glances are exchanged, the sort of glances that say, "Oh, God, this can't end well. We should probably stop him, shouldn't we?" But also they aren't doing anything, which just makes them a bunch of terrified hypocrites. Thump, 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 goes the sound of Remus pounding down the hallway, the sound of the locks being disengaged at a downright frenetic pace, the slam of the door being thrown open. Silence. Everyone holds their breath. "Oh, shit!" comes the distant scream. Janice is on his feet and running to the door too now. He doesn't like running, he's realized. It's not as if he had much need for doing it when he'd been strictly confined to the realm of Thomas's mind. Why run when you can visualize yourself somewhere and be there immediately, after all? But today marks the 2nd day in a row he's had to sprint at full speed through the house and to the front door to stop something really terrible from occurring. God, does he hate his job. The door is open. Remus is kneeling down in the frame, the lamp discarded to one side. The bulb is broken and is definitely going to require some cleaning up later. What he's got halfway in his lap is most definitely not the new HelloFresh food shipment. "Is that—" Janice says, and takes a step closer so he can look over Remus's shoulder and properly see. And there, hair knotted and tangled, wearing strange clothes and smelling strongly of flowers, and with dirt and mud stained across basically every inch of his skin, is a very pale-looking, very unconscious— Thomas?